Good morning. I'm Jay Moran, Mayor of Manchester. Welcome to our wonderful town. As a athletic director and coach by trade, this is my classroom for the last 30 years, and I love that we're here. It gets me fired up. We're here to learn and an update on the Everybody Learns initiative from the governor and the commissioner and all those involved with it. It's a great day in Manchester to have the governor here. I just want to, coming off Thanksgiving, I would like to be grateful and thank you, Governor, for all your hard work with this initiative, but your work through the COVID-19. You're doing a wonderful job, and Manchester, the citizens of Manchester appreciate all that you've been doing, and so we thank you for that. And I thank our administration and our teachers. You know, we thank our first responders who deserve it, the doctors, the nurses, the nurse practitioners, the firefighters, police, those on the front line fighting COVID. But it's our teachers that are real heroes too, and I have our president of our Teachers Association here. Thank you for your great work. But you know, it's been, and I think that of course we thank the Dalio family for working with the governor on this great initiative and their support. Over $43 million committed to supporting this initiative. You'll hear numbers like 142,000 laptops and 60 households that have benefited, and those here in Manchester have benefited also. But you know, as a Catholic and Christian, we go from Thanksgiving to what we call Advent right now, and it gives us hope that in darkness there's always light, and that's what we celebrate in my religion as we move forward. And through this darkness of the pandemic, we find the silver lining and we find light, and this initiative has been outstanding, has helped so many people. And hope in this pandemic is the kindness and compassion that we share as neighbors to get us through this. But most importantly today, we talk about the hope, and that's that our future, the greatest gift, our children, and how we are trying to work on the inequities that everyone in the state of Connecticut, here in Manchester, through this initiative, through the leadership of our governor, will help our students that get the opportunity to learn through this dark time, this pandemic, and we will see light. We're coming around the corner here. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce a fine Manchester High alum. She's a record holder, not in here, but in the pool. So her name's up on banners there. She is a proud Manchester High parent, but she also is most proud today to represent us as the principal of Manchester High, Caitlin Miner. Caitlin, come on over.
Thank you for that, Mayor Moran. Welcome, Governor Lamont and team. Welcome to Manchester High School. We're thrilled to have you here today. Last winter, on a day like this gym would have been bustling from the moment an adult entered this school until the very end of the day. PE classes all day, basketball, wrestling, unified basketball tournaments, pep rallies, fundraisers. It really was the home away from home for many, if not most, of our students. Although very quiet here right now, although it was until you all walked in, our student body is still at school today. Right now at this minute, they are with their mentors doing a Wednesday morning check-in in their small group. And yes, they are using their new computers to do so. Since March, educators everywhere, and especially in Manchester, have had to reimagine all aspects of our program. We now have to think about which direction we walk down the hallway, how many students can safely be in a classroom at one time, can activities be conducted safely, how will food distribution to teenagers work, and hundreds more questions. And that was before we got to talking about student learning. What do we prioritize in the curriculum? What will teaching and learning look like if you're a hybrid student, if you're a remote student? And the fundamental question of time and space, when and where will the learning happen? And for that, students needed access immediately to devices and to Wi-Fi. And at its core, this funding was about access, students' right to their education, whether there was a pandemic or not. Clearly, these laptops have been critical, but they wouldn't have mattered if it wasn't paired with talented teachers working incredibly hard and committing to learning right alongside students as we go. They also wouldn't have mattered without the very hard work of families and parents. They are our partners. They've been very patient as we have reimagined our program, and students are fortunate to have that partnership between school and families. While these computers are critical to bridging this digital divide, For me, this commitment on the part of the communities in our state is also a sign of hope. This was a really obvious and visible gap, the digital divide. It was a barrier to educational equity and access, and as a state we saw it. We quickly collaborated on it, acted on it, thank you to the Dalios as well. But now we're challenged to see the more invisible barriers and gaps in opportunity in order to provide access to all. These gaps and barriers are still embedded in our systems, and now I'm hopeful that because we saw this one, we will continue to identify those that are less visible. On behalf of the students of Manchester High School, the Red Hawks, thank you very much for your commitment and for these resources, and welcome to MHS.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt Geary, the Superintendent of Schools in Manchester. Very excited this morning to have the Governor and the entire team here in the gym with us in these unique and trying times. Also want to acknowledge Daryl Thames, our board chair, who's joined us this morning. We would not be able to do this work without strong local leadership from both Mr. Thames and Mayor Moran, who you met earlier. Want to just briefly thank the Governor's Office, the Connecticut State Department of Education, all the state and local taxpayers. For us, it's also about the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, the LEGO Foundation with support from First Book, the Dalio Foundation, who Mrs. Miner mentioned. We're also the recipient of Alliance Grant funding. So this kind of effort, ensuring that all students have devices, does not happen easily. It does not happen without collaboration, both between state and local governments as well as private foundations, and we saw that as well. For us, it looks like iPads in the hands of every student in pre-K, K, and 1, Chromebooks in the hands of students in grades 2 to 8, and Dell laptops, of course, in the hands of students from grades 9 through 12, and using Chromebooks also for our adult education learners. And as Mrs. Miner said, closing the digital divide, to do that, devices were obviously necessary, and we're extremely appreciative of the mobilization that occurred to make sure that that could happen. But the digital divide would not be closed without the hard work of teachers who have innovated in numerous ways since March and continue to innovate and learn day to day, and really are going to pave the way for dramatic transformation of how we do learning when we come out of the pandemic. This is probably our single greatest shot to reform education, at least in my lifetime, and we should make sure we take advantage of that. It also would not be possible without parents and families. This is definitely the single greatest collaboration between schools and families in the history of education. Happening right now, we would not be able to ensure students are learning without support from families at home, and that's obviously always been critically important. It has never been more important than today. And then finally, a large shout out to our students. We talk a lot, particularly lately, about social emotional learning skills, self-regulation, self-management, responsible decision-making. We don't really measure those skills, although we should start. But we talk about them all the time. And those skills are critically important for students who are home learning on a laptop. Self-management, self-regulation, responsible decision-making, all skills that we teach in schools every day. And again, this has been the single greatest opportunity for students to test those out. As Mrs. Miner said, obviously the digital divide is critically important, but there remain divides, many of them in terms of access to quality education, housing, healthcare, food and nutrition, environmental protection. Those divides exist across races, ethnicities, socioeconomic statuses, immigration statuses, first languages, you name it, they exist. And we're extremely proud and thankful today for what we hope to be the first significant urgent step taken to continue to close those divides. We're extremely grateful for the support from the state and from all our partners, and just really happy to host this event. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Secretary McCraw from OPM.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me here with you today. Certainly, this is a historic moment in Connecticut's history, and specifically the history and impact that we're having on the children of Connecticut. Today, we stand here celebrating our ability to close the digital divide and meet the needs of our school districts. And this is long overdue, and perhaps one of the silver linings or few benefits of the COVID-19 pandemic. In March, as COVID-19 arrived in Connecticut, we were faced with the daunting task of hastily moving our students to remote learning, knowing that not all students would have access to a laptop and a high-speed internet connection. But Governor Lamont saw this challenge as an opportunity to address the student device gap that was estimated at 142,000. He swiftly directed his administration to secure 60,000 laptops through the Partnership for Connecticut in April, and we allocated $43.5 million of our federal support from the CARES Act to invest in an additional 82,000 student laptops and 60,000 at-home connections in late July. Now, as we jointly stand here today, we have been able to purchase and deploy these devices across our entire state. While the laptops might be a near-term investment, this has really been an investment in the state for the long term. Governor Lamont prioritized and insisted on supporting our students so that they could continue their traditional curriculum in the face of a pandemic, but also so that they could learn new skills with technological resources they will need and use in the 21st century. And that means that the young girl can now take home her laptop each night and enrich herself with new skills, new experiences, and perhaps pursue a field of education in a career she had never before considered. The struggling student with reading will have the chance to spend more time practicing on RazKids and to have his literacy and cachet of awards blossom, turning the challenges and the weaknesses into strengths. So today, Governor, we applaud you in making sure that Connecticut is a leader. In fact, the $67.5 million that we have invested in our students shows that we are ranking first in the nation and first in the region and a major leader in the nation. And second, the $267 million that we invested in our students' reopening education plan is one of the largest state funding plans per student in the region. We celebrate and applaud this great accomplishment. The students and teachers who were starved for these devices now have them. We are reducing barriers to ensuring that kids can maintain and continue a strong education by making sure every student who did not have a device, that their need has been met. And we know that this could be life-changing for some. So, in the spirit of the remarks of the mayor, I agree. In this paradigm-altered holiday season, this gives me hope, and that is what public service is about, ensuring that we provide the resources to meet the public service needs. And Governor Lamont, you have done that today by launching the Everybody Learns initiative and ensuring that Connecticut has closed the digital divide. Thank you very much, and with that, I give you Miguel Cardona, the Commissioner of Education.
Thank you, Secretary McCaw, Governor, Superintendent, Principal. Thank you for having us here this morning. You know, there's a saying, if you fail to plan, plan to fail. In Connecticut, the heroic efforts of our educators, our principals, our superintendents to make sure that our schools are ready for students to come in the fall was amazing. Their planning included mitigation strategies unlike anything we've ever done in education. And because of that, over 70% of our students had the opportunity in Connecticut to walk into a schoolhouse over the last 3 months and receive an in-person learning experience. Now, that was difficult. It took a lot of planning, it took a lot of collaboration, it took a lot of sacrifice. And we're still learning, and we're still getting better every single day. But they planned, and because of that, the students in Connecticut are better off. Other planning took place to address what we know has been an ongoing issue, not only in Connecticut, but throughout the country, this digital divide. Some students have better access to technology and connectivity and quality content than other students. So when we rely on remote learning, we either exacerbate the gap or we close the gaps. There's no middle ground. Because of great planning led by our governor, we can say today that Connecticut has made amazing steps toward closing the digital divide that exists in Connecticut. And this will produce fruit for many years to come. This is something that a year ago might have been a challenge that we felt that we couldn't take on, but we did. You know, we know we're in a health pandemic. We're also in an educational crisis. And this planning and this action led by our governor with the Everyone Learns campaign, is giving our students that opportunity. I talked to you earlier about the opportunity to be in the classroom, but for our students who are learning from home, they now have the opportunity to continue their learning and access that quality education. As Secretary mentioned, the CRF funds that were provided were the highest in the region. $43.5 million for devices, in addition to the wonderful donation by the Dalio Foundation through the partnership. We were able to provide 142,000 devices to the students in Connecticut. Keep in mind, there are about 515,000 students. So in this short period of time, 142,000 devices. And the connectivity piece was critically important as well. You can have a device, but if you're not connected, you're not going to be able to access high-quality content. And the quality content is that third piece. We've worked really hard at the agency to try to provide access to high-quality content so that the students could access good materials from their home. I'm really proud to be a part of this team. I'm really proud of the leadership that's being shown here to say we're going to close the digital divide, we're going to address it, and we want to do it aggressively. I'm really proud of that. A lot of work went into this. I want to acknowledge Deputy Commissioner Desi Nesmith, Ajiko Palakrishnan at the State Department of Education, who've worked tirelessly to not only get information from districts in the spring, but also use that information to make sure that the districts that have the greatest need get the computers, get the devices. Thank you, Governor, for your push on this, for your leadership with this. Thank you, Secretary, for prioritizing this and making sure these things get done first. Our kids in Connecticut can't wait. We're proud of the work of our educators. We're proud of their work. We're proud of their commitment, their sacrifice. And we know that together our students in Connecticut have a shot because of the commitment of our educators and our leaders. As I said before, you fail to plan, plan to fail. In Connecticut, there's been some good planning over the summer and great implementation in the fall. Let's keep it up for the kids of Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Governor. And again, welcome to Manchester. Thank you, Governor Lamont.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This is the Hall of Champions, Jay. You guys are pretty good. Kayla, where's the swimming? You're the star, and look, it's going to be COVID cloudy in December, but things are getting better early in the new year. Great progress in the vaccines. Tell these kids they're going to be, winter sports are coming back as well. But first and foremost, we're doing everything we can to keep kids learning. And, a year and a half ago when I took office, I thought that education was the most important thing we can do. Most important thing we can do in terms of giving kids opportunity, kids who have been left behind for a long time. Most important thing we can do in terms of workforce and making sure we're training people for the jobs that are out there. And, inherited that deficit, and first thing Melissa and I did was keep faith in terms of education funding going forward. But you play the cards you're dealt, and COVID hit, and all of a sudden our schools and colleges were shutting down. And these are some of the best schools and colleges in the country. It's worth noting that. I mean, Texas has oil, and Florida has sunshine, and we've always had the best education system, K through 12 and universities. And that was not going to mean a stop in terms of kids and their opportunity in education going forward. So Melissa and Miguel and team, we got together pretty early on. And we realized, okay, the schools were closed back in the spring. What are we going to do? Well, able to work a little faster than government is sometimes the private sector and not-for-profits. Our great friend Barbara Dalio stepped up. The Hartford Foundation stepped up. 60,000 laptops were delivered in relatively short order, a down payment on what we had to do going forward. We realized over the course of the summer that wasn't good enough. We did a complete survey, Miguel working with the superintendents, seeing what was the need out there. Who were the kids that were going out? Which families couldn't afford it? Who didn't have the internet access? To make sure that come fall, everybody would be taken care of as best we could. And then with the CARES Act funding, we made a priority. We made a priority of education. No state in the country spent more per capita on education out of CARES Act than the state of Connecticut. You know, first and foremost, everything we could do to keep our schools open safely, since there's nothing is more important than in-person education, as long as you can do it safely. And then we also realized that given the fact that, look, kids are more likely to have an in-person classroom option in Connecticut than just about any state in our region, which is a good thing, but still, the vast majority are not in school full-time. The vast majority of our K through 12 students are virtual or hybrid. And that made it all the more important that we make sure that nobody is left behind there. So that's when we did one of the largest allocations to bridging the digital divide, $43 million, as you heard. You'd be surprised. What state made the biggest investment in bridging the digital divide? Nick Simmons can't answer this question. Anybody can make a guess? Because you wouldn't guess Mississippi, but it wasn't my first guess. But it's important just to remember what that means for these kids. Okay, we get the laptops out there. I think a couple thousand were delivered right here in Manchester, and we've got a few thousand more to go, but we're making sure that is happening. And then we realized a laptop doesn't work unless they have internet access. And Nick Simmons, who's on our team, he was a principal and a teacher, worked with the telecom companies. And we got 60,000 of our families who otherwise wouldn't have internet access and signed up for a year. And we got 160 plus Wi-Fi hotspots around the state, making sure that more people have access, making sure our libraries have high-speed internet access, making sure that we could work with parents and give them some of the training they needed to make sure their kids could access. Frankly, the kids were sometimes training the parents when it came to that. And that's the investment we've tried to make, to keep faith with our kids and do everything we can to keep education going. COVID doesn't stop for the seasons, and education can't stop due to COVID. And that's why I'm really proud of this investment we made. Look, back in the 1930s, they had rural electrification. They realized you were a second-class citizen unless you had electricity. Well, in the year 2020, you're a second-class citizen unless you have internet access. We know what internet access means for our kids. And by the way, to our teachers, I just got to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your teachers are coming in, they're teaching, they're Zoom learning, and my God, I know how complicated that is, having to do both at the same time, and just really leading by example, for which I am so thankful. And can I just say that this digital divide is about education, but it's about so much more. It's if we've learned anything in this COVID crisis, it's telehealth. And if you're going to transform health and make healthcare broadly available, and all the distress going on in and around COVID and the counseling that's necessary, telehealth is a basic right. Health is a basic right, and telehealth is a real tool in that direction. So what we learned in terms of telecommuting, other ways that this bridging of the digital divide is going to be giving everybody, especially our kids, a fair shot at the starting line of life. And that's why it was a priority for our administration. I love to see what it's meaning for the kids here in Manchester and beyond. And look, we're going to be back in the classroom full-time soon enough. In the meantime, if you have to quarantine, Superintendent was saying you had to quarantine for a while. Wednesdays, snow days, these are not lost days anymore. These are days where you can continue to learn and educate online. So I'm really proud of this day. I think Connecticut is really one of the leaders across the country in doing a fast start in terms of bridging the digital divide, and we're just getting started. Thanks, everybody. Anybody else?
Thank you, Governor. Last speaker this morning is Doug Casey from the Connecticut Education Technology Leaders Association, and a great partner in this work as well. Welcome, Doug.
Good morning. You know, long before COVID, our state was in some ways really well connected. In most parts of Connecticut, you can have access to high-speed internet to your home. From an education perspective, we were the first state to connect every single district to high-speed, virtually unlimited broadband and safe internet for kids through the Connecticut Education Network. For the past 20 years, we've had an interagency commission for education technology that's been not only equipping local communities to help bridge the digital divide, but also making sure that when technology gets into kids' hands and teachers' hands, that they have the skills and competencies to make the best use of that technology. So in a lot of ways, it's not surprising that we're telling this story here and in some ways reflecting back in Connecticut. I'm deeply grateful for Governor Lamont and for the team that's worked on delivery of devices and connecting students at home. I'm really happy that we are in a state where we say it's not acceptable for some kids to go home and be isolated and offline and falling behind while other kids are engaged, connected, and have the tools and resources they need for engaged, personalized learning, and probably most importantly, have those ongoing relationships with the great teachers and leaders at schools that are so important, not just for their book learning, but for their growth and personal development. So it does make sense that we're standing here today and in some ways reflecting back. And I would say, I would offer that this is really just the beginning. We've now equipped every student in the state with the devices that they need for virtual learning, blended learning, or as my mom likes to say, viral learning, which I initially corrected her on, but then I said, you know what, I like the idea of viral learning. Let's let learning go viral. So I would just offer up, this is a great day to reflect, but also let's look forward. We've equipped our students with the tools and the resources that they need as that baseline for learning. So now let's dream big about what's possible with personalized, engaging learning 24/7. So again, I want to thank the governor and the rest of our team, Nick and Ajit and Commissioner Cardona. It has been a collective effort and a lot of amazing work that's gone on through school leaders, our tech directors, our digital learning experts, and our teachers. I think the best is yet to come, and thanks for the time this morning.
Someone speak to how is moving now this digital divide, how is this going to translate into closing something like the achievement gap? How are you going to be able to tell that this is making a difference in children's education, that education is being improved, that student performance is being improved in Connecticut as a result of this?
Thank you for the question. The question is, how do we know that this is going to help achievement in Connecticut? You know, experience is our best teacher. In the spring, we saw districts literally flip the switch and students have access to high-quality curriculum, grade-level content that was designed for online platform. We saw some students go from the classroom on one day to a digital learning experience the next day without missing a beat. And we saw in other districts, unfortunately, 4 weeks before they even got anything in their hands. And the materials weren't necessarily the same quality as the students in the other district. So we know providing the right device, good connectivity, and quality content will address that gap and provide those students who didn't have it before the opportunity to have access to high-quality content. And what we're seeing is when students are engaging in high-quality content, we have a whole host of what we call formative assessments, where they can communicate to the teacher by taking these formative assessments what they're understanding and what they're not understanding, so we could target instruction and intervention accordingly.
But I mean, are you going to be taking standardized testing as now?
So the NAEP, you might be referring to the NAEP, which is a national assessment that's done in different districts. That has been suspended so that states could focus on how to implement an assessment in their state that can assess where students are.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is how are you going to assess whether or not this is actually improved education? Are you going to look at student scores? Are you going to, what do you do?
Sure. So student achievement scores, right. Student achievement scores definitely will be a measure, a barometer of how it's working. But we also know student engagement, whether students are logged on, whether students are engaged virtually with the teacher. We can tell if they have a device and connectivity if they're engaging in the lesson. If they don't have a device, if they don't have connectivity, we don't know if the students are engaged in the content.
So does the state standardized test, my understanding that those are still going forward, they just won't be linked with the accountability provision?
Correct. Correct. You know, it's really important to point out that the assessment system is really our way of assessing what needs are going to be. And we know that we suspended the test last year. It just didn't make sense to do that. It was too new. This year, we want to make sure that we provide some opportunity for students to tell us what they've learned or what gaps exist so that we could target resources and support there. Thank you.
You can't confirm that all students who were in need of these devices in the state of Connecticut are now equipped with them?
You know, what we can tell you is that we did a survey in the spring where we learned from superintendents what the needs were, what we call the obstacle to learning through technology, and we were able to fill those. So it might mean that some districts already had technology for some students, but other students didn't have it. And we're proud to say that today we can announce that that digital divide has been addressed in Connecticut.
What about the ongoing help for parents who may not be as well equipped with this equipment or necessarily have the time to be able to commit to it because they're working full-time after school? Are you continuing partnerships with like the Lose World Club, per se, to help these students on their devices?
Definitely. So we're continuing to do statewide parent seminars and how to do it in English and Spanish. But the real credit goes to the districts who really set up virtual office hours to explain to parents, to give them tools for them to support their learners. You know, parents have really done yeoman's work over the last year to try to balance as well as our educators. So that's happening really at the district level. I'm proud to say that at the state level, in short order, we created what's called the Connecticut Learning Hub. So if you go onto our Connecticut State Department of Education website, under our academics team led by Irene Parisi, we have a learning hub where students can access quality content, and districts could use that material as well free of charge. Thank you. Yes.
Another question, more on the data side of this engagement. I believe in mid-November there were about 2.8, roughly 3% of fully remote students who were still disconnected. Where are we now with all us who are now remote, after the holidays?
Sure. We're proud to say that the number decreased after every collection period, right? So it was 3%. I think it hovered around that number, went down a little bit, but ultimately we're still working on making sure that we're engaging all students. Many students are dealing with changes in their home environment too. So if their parents are working and they can't connect from their home, they're connecting from somewhere like the Boys and Girls Club or somewhere else. So we're working to make sure that those students have access as well. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but it's a little bit around the 3% mark, right?
Now that more students are learning from home as the positivity rates increase, do you have any sense of whether the model that students are engaged in, hybrid or remote, et cetera, whether there's different student participation rates? Do you have any sort of data to show whether or not these devices are bringing that providing so that students are trying to?
Thank you for that question, Jackie, because it gives me the opportunity to share that we engage in a process in Connecticut that I don't know too many other states have done in our performance office to try to get student data that's a little bit more specific than generic data so that we can assess whether or not students who are in hybrid or fully remote are accessing learning as well. What I can tell you is that our recent data, which I have a board meeting in a little bit and we'll be sharing that, shows that students that are high needs are attending less remotely. So it kind of supports that if you can safely provide in-person learning opportunities, that's what we want to encourage. And we're going to continue our efforts to engage those high needs students in remote learning when they're required to be in remote learning.
Obviously, this issue is top of mind through the pandemic, but what kind of long-term effects
what we're here to celebrate today, it really gives us an opportunity to equal level the playing field, right? To say that all students now in Connecticut have an opportunity to access blended learning in a way that only some students did before the pandemic. That's significant. That's significant because we know moving forward, the laptop or the device is a new pencil. So basically what we did in Connecticut is provide opportunities for all students to have a level playing field with the tools that they need to access learning 24/7, as Doug Casey said.
Governor,
Thank you.
a moment ago that told the principal to tell the kids that there's going to be winter sports. So could you elaborate on that? Because I know, as you're aware, this is a sports-minded state committed to respect, and I'm sure high school athletes.
We postponed winter sports, as have most of our neighboring states, until, in our case, January 19th. And we did that in an effort to do everything we could to keep the schools open, knowing that there was some infection, not necessarily on the rink or on the court, but in and around sports. And I'm really hopeful that that's a January 19th date the kids can look forward to when we get things open again.
In your next two-year budget plan, which will be submitted in the 21 session, will you be proposing any additional state funding to sort of support and maintain this effort to reduce the digital divide and keep it from reappearing, if you ever close it?
Well, Miguel will have plenty to say on that subject as Melissa and I start, walking through those numbers. But, to your question, it's not like in classroom versus virtual. These Chromebooks at home are going to be part of education forever. And you're going to have more of a complementary education between what's going on in the classroom and what you're able to continue to do at home. We're finding that in the workforce as well.
Governor, there were several mentions of the other types of achievements, things that are helping or contributing rather to the achievement gap in Connecticut that may be preventing students from logging on. Are there any efforts that you might want to highlight that could tackle that, or future proposals that might tackle those other issues that are tackling the achievement gap?
Well, Jackie, were you talking about logging on in particular or more broadly about the achievement gap?
Why students maybe a computer might not be the only reason why they're not able to log on.
Yeah. There's nothing better than a great teacher. And Miguel and I have made a particular effort to make sure we have teachers that represent the broadest diversity of role models for our kids, in terms of people of color, in terms of more guys there, just so that when you're a young person sitting in that 5th grade class, you can look up and have somebody that identifies with you and you can identify with them. And I think that's good for all the kids in the class to have that. So that's another priority for me.
Another topic, Governor, you had a conversation, I guess, with some doctors after you spoke to us, some of us yesterday regarding your substitute teacher recruitment effort. How did that talk go? Has your position changed at all in response to what you heard?
We had a really constructive conversation. Paul's referring to some of the folks at Yale New Haven had sent a letter saying, get stricter. Our hospitals are getting stretched. And they impressed upon me the urgency of what's going on in the ICUs in the hospitals. If back in April, May, a lot of so-called elective surgeries could be put off, and that created a lot of additional capacity. They say this time around we're not as flexible there because so many of those surgeries were put off. Obviously, there's a difference between, a knee and a hip and plastic surgery compared to a heart and lungs and things that can't be put off. And, from my side, I said, I don't govern by fiat. If I say close the restaurants tomorrow, it's not like everybody goes home and sits with a TV dinner on their lap. This takes persuasion and people understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. And every step of the way, we lead with public health, but I understand more than ever the urgency you feel and what we're trying to do to support our hospitals, especially over the next month until the vaccines get going. I mean, if we can start getting folks in our nursing homes vaccinated by the end of this month, they're the folks that create a lot of the demand on our hospitals. So there will be a virtuous cycle that starts up, I hope, early next year.
And speaking of vaccinations, have you made any kind of determination? You've spoken several times now about possibly turning to the rainy day fund to fund a vaccine distribution plan. Has any determination been made whether or not how you would do that? Would you do that by executive order? Would that require a legislature that you sign into law?
I'm meeting with Melissa on that this afternoon, and she's ready to run up here, it looks like. But look, I'm waiting for, obviously the feds aren't getting their act together. I don't know if they're going to get their act together by the end of this year. I've got to put in place an infrastructure to make sure the vaccines get out to people. I appreciate the feds are paying for the vaccine, they're paying for the refrigeration. That's a big start. But the administration of this is very labor intensive and pretty darn expensive. So if they're not going to step up and help, we're going to do it ourselves. We'll find a way to do it.
Is there, I think maybe you asked this yesterday, and there isn't an estimate, but I'll ask you again if you can't remember. Is there an estimate of how much it would cost to distribute the vaccines? Yes.
I can tell you nationwide, they have estimated $8 billion will be required by the states in order to get this properly administered. You know, it's going to take close to a year to do that. I always do the math and multiply by 1% since that's sort of our per capita amount, and that's probably what we're estimating as well.
Have you made any sort of commitment to funding the ECS formula as Labor Day is supposed to go up $40 million next year? Has that been something that you're interested in?
I haven't gotten into the line items on the budget yet, Jack, but I think you know how important ECS was for us in the last round. What that meant to the superintendent, some certainty, so you could actually budget. You know, budgeting in the state over the last 10 years has been a little herky-jerky, and numbers changed all the time, and it was very late in the day. So whatever we do, we're going to give people a clear indication of where we are, and ECS is really important to me. No, it's not an infection rate, but I got to do everything I can to make sure that our hospitals and ICUs and nurses and docs are not overwhelmed. You know, I've seen hospital systems get overwhelmed in other parts of the country, not to mention Italy and other parts of the world. That's my key metric.
Doctor, who makes the determination on who gets the vaccine when? Is that the decision made by the federal government or at the state level?
Yeah, the CDC is giving us guidance, and then the final call is up to the states. And as you know, Reg Edie and Deirdre Gifford are taking the lead on that. That's going to be our briefing tomorrow, where we lay out what those priorities are. My hunch is we're going to be pretty close to what the CDC said in terms of prioritizing public health workers and then the most vulnerable.
And states make a decision on who is determined or considered an essential worker and that kind of thing?
That's right. Essential is more how you prioritize who gets the vaccine, because that's going to be a heavy prioritization for the first 6-12 weeks. Thanks, everybody.